welcome to episode 160 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I am here with
Andrew Swafford.
And Lydia Creech.
And in today's episode, we will be doing movies we saw this week. In part 1 and in part 2, we will be joined by a very special guest, Miss Wendy Mays of Pet Cinematary. If that name sounds familiar, it's because that is also our name. And that's really the only, that's really the coincidence that happened that made us, be aware of Wendy's podcast and made us want to reach out to join. But also it's because her podcast is pretty great. I'll talk to her about this, in part 2, but I listened to her most recent episode about beginners in anticipation of this episode. And I feel like I know a lot of personal, intimate information about her and her family history now.
I really like her episode about Alien and her episode about Inside Llewyn Davis. Would definitely recommend those to people.
Yeah, but I'm sure we'll talk about that more in part 2. Let's go ahead and get into part 1 with movies that we saw this week. Let's go ahead and kick off with one that we talked about last week. But Andrew, you and Lydia were not here, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts on Good Time.
Yes, Good Time by the Safdie brothers, who made Heaven Knows What. I'm sure if you guys listened last week, you already know the plot synopsis. But one more time, in case anyone has forgotten, this is one night in the life of a character played by Robert Pattinson. He's a petty criminal trying to both run from the cops and get his brother out of prison at the same time. And I think this is the most propulsive and vibrant movie of the year, but it's also one of the most human and grounded movies. I might compare it to something like Tangerine in the way that it juggles its extreme energy with a lot of empathy and just like, not necessarily empathy for Robert Pattinson's character because he's
a monster.
Person. Yeah, and the movie acknowledges the fact that he's a horrible person, but it's all about like human drama and relationships between people, and it's not just like this big spectacle, right? It's such a well-crafted movie. It has this hyper close-up camera work that is always in like a sparring match with this score by Oneohtrix Point Never. It is brilliant. It is this dizzying electronic composition that runs for almost the entire length of the film. I actually made an electronic album this summer, and listening to the score is just the kind of thing that makes you want to give up music. It's just so good. The one thing that I haven't seen people mention that much in relation to Good Time is the way that the scenes are lit. They're almost lit exclusively by these mundane sources of artificial light that are really prevalent in the 21st century, like computer screens and cell phones and car headlights, neon signs and shop windows. But because the camera work is so tight and close with the characters, we're always kept at a distance from where the actual sources of light are. So they're just making this strange electronic, otherworldly atmosphere around these characters that we are so up close and personal with. And one thing that I was struck by, I've seen it twice now, and it's really just got my blood pressure up every single time. It has this very dense conflict per minute ratio where you can never really catch your breath. I think the best example of this is a scene where Robert Pattinson is sitting on the couch with this very young girl he doesn't know very well, and he sees himself on the nightly news as like a criminal that everybody needs to be on the lookout for, and you in the audience, like in this very Hitchcockian way, are screaming like, no! And then the tension is released when he blocks the screen, so we're like, but then he blocks the screen by kissing this girl who's very young, and so your no is even louder the second time, and then the kiss gets interrupted, so you're like, good. But it's been interrupted by someone who's waking up who's very, very angry, and I don't want to reveal who that person is, but the tension just like continues to exponentially raise itself, and it's kind of brilliant in the way that it's stringing you along in this character's spiral of criminality, makes you just as stressed out and wired as he is. I want to echo the sentiments of Nathan and many other critics who are reading a racial subtext in this film. It's kind of about white privilege in the eyes of the law and the scapegoating of black bodies in the eyes of the law. And it truly works as a subtext in that when I was watching the film the first time, it just didn't register for me until about a couple hours after watching, when all of a sudden a light bulb just went off. And then watching it a second time, it just opens this entirely new experience. So this is it's a densely packed movie. It's a densely layered movie. It is a crazy, cool visual experience to behold. I think it's one of the very best movies of the year. People have to go see this if it is in their city, and it is not in every city. So please do if you have the opportunity. Lydia, what did you think?
I'm absolutely going to echo. It's one of my top movies of 2017. I think it's interesting that you compared it to Tangerine, mostly because I was really struck by how gorgeous Good Time looks. I mean, it's not a gorgeous movie. It's really gross, and all the like Robert Pattinson's character is gross and greasy looking and gritty. But Tangerine, it was shot famously on iPhones, like lenses. And then, so I got nerdy and I wanted to know how Good Time was shot, and it's shot. And the Safdie brothers actually shot it on film.
Oh yeah, I forgot about this. You did all this research on like how they zoomed in on the frames, right?
Yes. Okay. They shot it on the half frame, which is 2perf. On a 35 millimeter film, a frame is 4 perforation holes, and to save film you can shoot twice as much if you squish the frame to fit into along 2 perforations. That's how spaghetti westerns were shot, because it saves a lot of money, and it's an anthropomorphic format, so the aspect ratio is 2.4. And so you mentioned getting like these really in your face close-ups, and I think that's really exasperated by the way they chose to shoot it. And and it gives this really great look when you print the release print and you blow the frame up again to full size, like the grain of the film becomes really apparent. And it just, it fits in so well with the world they've crafted.
And I think that if you were to be this up close and personal in people's faces in your standard film print, you would like see a lot of pores and stuff on their faces, right? But it's mostly like the film grain creates this weird smoothness over the entire image that goes along with the digital aesthetic and all the neon colors, right?
Yes, and I listened to the Film Comment podcast interview with them, and they're like such considerate filmmakers, and they directly acknowledged, you pointed me towards this podcast episode, Andrew, but they directly acknowledged that racial subtext and were pretty intelligent about just putting it there for us to discover. And I also want to highlight the supporting performances. Jennifer Jason Leigh and Barkhad Abdi show up in like little side roles, and they're amazing. And also, oh, it's a spoiler. I don't want to talk about him.
Oh, is it the guy with the Sprite bottle?
Yes.
Nathan talked about him last week.
Good.
But yeah, he is really great. He has this intense monologue in the middle of the movie that Nathan praised very well in the last episode. But yeah, enough praises cannot be sung about that character and just the vocal work that he does.
And I think again that like shooting in that format, just him talking. I mean, they intercut him reliving this monologue, but also just being so close and like cramped together in the car, and also blown up in the frame. Like, it's a perfect convergence of like writing and then filmic technique. I'm impressed with the Safdie bros. Heaven knows what sounds awful, but I might check it out.
Yeah. I'm in the exact same boat. I deliberately avoided that movie when it came out because I just knew that my poor little heart couldn't take it. But maybe now, having a taste for them and what they're doing aesthetically, I need to go back.
High recommendation from me. Good time.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, Good Time is, like Andrew said, is in theaters now, but it's kind of limited. So if you have a chance to see it, I would also, I talked about it last week, but I would recommend it. Another one that's kind of been in limited release that has been gaining somewhat of a following is Ingrid Goes West. This is I believe the directorial debut of Matt Spicer. Spicer also co-wrote the script with David Branson Smith. And this movie stars Aubrey Plaza, Elizabeth Olsen, O'Shea Jackson Jr. And it follows Plaza's character, who is this kind of unhinged stalker who follows people on Instagram and then tries to weed her way into their life. And she decides after the death of her mother to follow Elizabeth Olsen's character, who is this I don't know, the way to describe it is this
lifestyle guru.
Yeah, this Instagram celebrity, which is kind of a weird term to, I don't know how really, you just describe it as people who take pictures with stuff that's happening in their lives and people really flock to it. But it's just this Instagram lifestyle guru person in LA, and kind of weeds her way into her life, with O'Shea Jackson Jr., also known as Lil Ice Cube. At least that's what I refer to him as. Lil Ice Cube, as her landlord slash bae. But because we're keeping this as millennial as possible, so I'm going to refer to him as her bae.
Yes, we got to speak to the youths.
But yeah, Ingrid Goes West. Andrew, what are your feelings about this one?
I liked it quite a bit. I think that it's crazy that this movie is playing in limited release because I think it could do really well if it was wide. But like The Little Hours, this is another movie produced by Aubrey Plaza. And also like The Little Hours, it's very original in its concept. It's very tightly scripted in the jokey factors of the comedy. And I got a lot of pleasure out of the delightful performances and the character writing, specifically from O'Shea Jackson Jr. And Elizabeth Olsen. O'Shea Jackson Jr., a.k.a. Lil Ice Cube, is a wannabe screenwriter who is obsessed with Batman in a way that I did not know could be genuinely endearing anymore. Like, usually when I encounter people who are obsessed with Batman, they're like borderline fascist nowadays. But he somehow makes it cute. And then we have Elizabeth Olsen, who is just, man, I've been saying this ever since I saw Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene, but she is just critically underutilized in Hollywood. She gets cast as like the weepy wife in Godzilla and like this side character in Age of Ultron who never gets anything to do. And she is such a good actress. So she gets stuff to do here, and I think she does a pitch perfect job at capturing this type of hipster fashionista who eats a lot of avocado toast and reps her brands on Instagram. She really it seems to enjoy playing that role. And there's obviously a lot of media criticism going on in this movie about people projecting this filtered version of their perfect life on the internet, and that leads to other people, voyeurs, developing these feelings of inadequacy and jealousy while also having access to instant communication with these people that they are jealous of. And it kind of creates an interesting push and pull of like friendship, but also kind of a frenemies relationship. I think that the satire starts kind of forced, kind of screechy, but eventually once Aubrey Plaza and Elizabeth Olsen get together, it finds its sweet spot of this tensely amusing character drama. But by the very end, I'm not giving anything away, but it doubles down to this surprisingly dark note that felt like a Twilight Zone episode to me. Some of the people I was watching this with, the ending did not work for them. They felt like it was maybe irresponsible in some way. But I like it. I think it pulls off what it's trying to do pretty well. I don't think this movie is as good as The Little Hours, which I think may end up in my top 10 of the year. And it's not really anything world-changing in terms of comedy, but I do like how it engages with social media technology. It's both cautionary and empathetic at the same time, which is a difficult line to toe. And just overall I wish that we had more original scripted comedies like this movie. Like, we're always harping on this idea that all the comedies that we get are these horrible improv fests, and there's not very interesting or original. Ingrid Goes West is interesting and original and well written, and it's not perfect, and it's not probably going to be your favorite movie of the year, but it's worth seeing.
Sure. Yeah. I would agree with that for the most part. I think that I definitely agree with the idea that this subject is something that kind of has a wealth of just an outpour of content that you could kind of, really criticize and poke at with just the world of social media and these like I described Instagram celebrities, because it's a incredibly absurd concept where these people are just taking pictures of random stuff they're doing in their life, and they get a bunch of likes and comments and such, and that's how they're making that's how they're getting paid as people who
sponsored content.
as people who work jobs and stuff. It's kind of like what's really like that's a whole other thing. The frustration with that. I kind of feel though that this movie is the king of comedy for millennials. I mean, it's
A little bit.
this story of this delusional, unhinged character that kind of skirts all of the flaws that she has to kind of focus in on this really not this person but just this identity in this idyllic lifestyle. I think that something like the King of Comedy, and ironically I watched this right after I watched Female Trouble for last week's episode, and I felt like Female Trouble hit on kind of the celebrity aspect even more. I think Ingrid Goes West does not have the sharpness, the cut of something like King of Comedy or even Female Trouble. I think it does play. I think it kind of withholds its. I think it withholds it a little bit. It kind of does this twist, kind of pivot halfway through the movie with Elizabeth Olsen's brother who shows up halfway through. That I feel.
I did not like that character. I mean, I know I'm not supposed to like that character, but he did throw the movie off for me in a weird way.
Yeah, I think he just throws the movie off because I think for leading up to that, it's really good because the power is all in Aubrey Plaza's character. And whenever he shows up, the power transfers from her to him. And that's just that's a less interesting
because
movie.
We have
and
no
I think
investment
that
in him as a character. We don't
exactly.
want him to, and I mean, it's not like we want Aubrey Plaza to have the power either, but we see her motivations for having the power. And when we see him, it's just kind of this cardboard cutout of a evil, I don't know, manipulative dude.
Yeah, well, it maybe power's not the right word. It's more just Aubrey Plaza controls this story for the most part, and then she gives up control of that story to this guy, and that's just less. It makes her spiral less. Again, it just makes it less impactful. Because I think that if she had the power the entire movie, I think that's what kind of makes something like King of Comedy so effective, because Robert De Niro's character constantly has the power and controls the story throughout that movie.
And for
and that's what makes
to totally work, you need to follow that logical thread, right? If the logical thread gets derailed into a different direction, then we're not talking about the same story anymore. We're not
exactly. Yeah, and so whenever they do that in Ingrid Goes West, it just kind of frustrated me because it was like, oh, well, you've given up what was effective about this movie. And so when the ending happens, it's fine, but it's kind of like, yeah, that's how that's where this was supposed to go. It did not have the impact it probably could have had. And so while I felt like it had all of these elements that really worked, and it did poke at this social media culture to an extent, I don't think it really made the impact that it could have, and that kind of left me. I liked it, but I felt like it could have done more. And maybe that comes from Matt Spicer is like I said, this is his first time directing. But I don't know. I think Ingrid Goes West is fine, but it's nothing. It's nothing amazing. But maybe that's how you kind of described it as well. I just came at it in a different way.
No, that's fine. I've also heard, in addition to the King of Comedy, comparisons to the movie Single White Female, which I've not seen, but there is a single white female reference in Ingrid Goes West at one point. I don't know where I'm going with that, but I just wanted to throw it out there because you mentioned other movies that reminded you of.
Honestly, if they just made the movie where O'Shea Jackson Jr., aka Little Ice Cube, vapes and talks about Batman, it would be like in my top 5.
Yeah, there we go. Let's get a Batman fandom movie starring O'Shea Jackson Jr.
Like there's a scene. I don't give a shit if this spoils anything. There's a scene where Aubrey Plaza dresses up as Catwoman and
oh my gosh, yes.
and has sex with Lil Ice Cube, and then afterwards like vapes. And I told Nathan about this. I thought he'd really appreciate that scene, but it's just that was like some peak cinema there.
You're bearing the lead here, which is that he asks her to talk dirty to him in the form of saying, "Tell me Gotham needs me."
Yeah,
which was one of the best lines in the movie.
Yeah. So Ingrid Goes West. It's in theaters now. If you're able to see it, and I think it's kind of it's one of those, if it pertains to that, if you're interested in that kind of social media culture and in kind of the celebrity that it is attached to that, I think it might interest you. At least that's what kind of drove me to this movie. But Andrew, you had one more movie you wanted to talk about.
Yes, and that is Step by Amanda Lipitz. I'm not sure how to say her name. She is a first-time film director, I believe. She came from Broadway, and this is a documentary set in a Baltimore high school exclusively for young African-American women. It's focusing on the STEP team at this high school during their senior year, and that also happens to be the year that Freddie Gray is killed in police custody. So that is put front and center at the very beginning of this movie. It frames the film. It sets the stakes for these girls who just desperately want to graduate high school and move out of their neighborhood by going to a college that's far away. But of course, they're poor. They need scholarships to make that happen, and so sports factor into that, but also academics and grades factor into that. This part of it is just a sports story, kind of like Hoop Dreams. There's a lot of time spent in practices and competitions, but the thing that I was most drawn to, and this is just my personal bias as a teacher, is the unprecedented amount of time that is spent in guidance counselors' offices and principals' offices and meetings about filling out the FAFSA so they can get financial aid and things like that. These are just things that we do not see on screen ever, much less on screen in the context of a story.
Yeah, because have you filled out a FAFSA? It's boring as shit.
But it is it is an epic
why would I want to watch that?
Struggle that could create great tension, I believe. But on one level, this movie was just very emotional to me because I'm currently missing the urban high school that I worked at last year. It made me feel the loss of familiar faces kind of acutely. But I also just really appreciated the angle from which it tackled school. It looks at the education system in a way that movies typically do not look at the education system. It shows the extent to which public education is, as an institution, it is sort of this game of hoops to jump through and numbers and decimals to pump up in order to qualify for this, that, or the other. And there's almost no class time in the film at all, but the grade point averages of the girls and the test scores of the girls are looming really large in the narrative. They often seal the girls' fate for good or for ill. And it's not really taking a particularly political stance on any of this stuff. It's just showing the system as it is in a way that you might compare to Frederick Wiseman's high school, which Lydia did a really good write-up for the site on in our most recent canon list. But it's like if Frederick Wiseman's high school were not focusing on the cultural indoctrination of the classroom, but instead focusing on just the behind-the-scenes bureaucracy of the graduation system. It's kind of like popping the case open of a product and like looking at all the wires and the microchips in the back and stuff. Of course, there's a lot more to talk about in terms of the way that sports and athleticism factors into the story, but that was the thing that I found most engaging about it, just as somebody who's deep in the bureaucracy of high school all the time. I really appreciated this movie, and I definitely want to recommend people check it out. It's probably not playing near you, or if it was playing near you, it's probably not playing near you anymore. I went to the last screening of this movie in Knoxville, but I'm sure it will come to VOD very soon, and I definitely want to give it a recommendation.
Yeah. All right. Step. So yeah, look for that. I feel like that's one that will pop up on a Netflix, Amazon, one of those dudes.
And hopefully
soon.
might get a Best Documentary nomination at the Oscars, but it's too early to worry about the Oscars.
Yeah. Don't bring that. Don't bring that up. I don't feel like thinking about that right now. All right. We're gonna take a short break. We'll be back with Wendy Mays after this, talking about Kiki's. I don't think I mentioned at the beginning. We're talking about Kiki's delivery. I just realized that.
Bury the lead.
Yeah, we're talking with Wendy about Kiki's Delivery Service, the 1989 Hayao Miyazaki movie, which I'm really excited about. It's one of my all-time favorites. So yeah, stick around. Hello, Hello, Cinematary listeners. This is Zach Dennis with an important message because I have not talked to you enough during this episode. Cinematary would like you to know that we do not want your money. We're not clamoring for your dollars. At this time, we just want to enjoy each other's company and talk about the movies and feel our, distribute our thoughts to the world and become podcasting moguls. Simple stuff. No money involved. However, there are a few things that you could do to help out the show. We would really appreciate it. The first thing is review us on iTunes. I know literally every podcast asks you this. They're like, please review us on iTunes. But it's like important because I don't know, iTunes, this is what they do. This is how the Apple lords constrict us and keep us in their system. That's just what happens. So we need a nice little review. Just take like 2 minutes one day, be like, this is podcast review time. Put us on the list. Secondly, you can tweet us. We're at Cinematary on Twitter, or better yet, send us an email. We're cinematary@yahoo.com so we can hear from you. If you're just like Zach, you have terrible taste. Why do you keep talking about these superhero movies? You keep talking about these Japanese movies where all they do is drink sake and smoke cigarettes and talk about how life's awful. And I'll be like, yeah, but you're wrong. And you'll be like, yeah, but I'm just emailing you. And it'll be a whole thing. It'll be a nice discourse. Think about it. And finally, please tell your friends and family, they should know as well. I'm sure they like movies. I'm sure they like podcasts. We don't know. To recap, review on iTunes Review Day. Do that. Secondly, send your thoughts, Twitter, email, one of those. Do it. Third, share with your friends and family. We would love it. Do it, please. Thank you. Now, let's get back to the show. With part 2 of episode 160 of Cinematary. In this part, we are joined very excitedly by our guest, Miss Wendy Mays. Wendy, thank you so much for coming on and talking about Kiki's delivery service with us.
Thank you guys so much for having me on. This is so much fun.
That's what we.
The Cinemataries get together.
Can I ask you a question about the name just before we get into movie stuff? Because our name is spelled
squared.
Cinematary with an A at the end instead of the way you spell cemetery with an E at the end. Ours was just a typo that we never corrected. Was yours intentional?
No, mine actually, it has ARY, which I don't know why I did it that way. And then somebody brought it up to me. They talked about how I spell it as well. And they were like, I like that you spell it the same way it's spelled for Pet Cemetery. And I was like, I was like, oh, did I? I just figured that's how I should spell it. I didn't even think about spelling it with an E. Like that didn't even come up in my brain.
Podcast. That makes it even better.
Yeah.
I tell people it's the commentary.
Yes. Cinema commentary.
Yeah.
There you go.
That was definitely
there
it.
you go. I like that.
I'll say first off, though, we all really like your podcast. I was telling them before we were recording that before this episode, just to kind of get all refreshed, I listened to your episode, the most recent one on beginners, and I was like, I don't know, I feel very comfortable talking with her for this episode because one, you covered a lot of ground, and two, there was a lot of very personal, intimate, family stuff going on in that episode that I'm like, I feel like I have like we're already like friends with Wendy just from this one episode, which I think is a testament to the podcast, is that you kind of feel like you're friends after listening to an episode.
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, I got really deep on that one. That movie.
No, I agree. That movie. I was listening to you guys talk about it, and I was like, oh yeah, you just sit there and let emotions hit you like waves.
Yeah, there was just so many different layers of that movie that hit me. Like, it was the right time, and it's still like years later I can watch it and it's still just I cry
all right,
throughout.
so yeah, in this part we're going to be talking about 1989's Kiki's Delivery Service, the Hayao Miyazaki movie. Like always, I'll do a quick rundown of some facts, and then we can toss it over for some discussion on the movie. Like I said, this was written and directed by Hayao Miyazaki. If you watch the English dub version of this movie, the voice cast includes Kirsten Dunst, Phil Hartman, Debbie Reynolds, Janine Garofalo, and Matthew Lawrence. And the movie tells the story of a young witch named Kiki who moves to a new town and uses her flying ability to earn a living. According to Miyazaki, the movie portrays the gulf between independence and reliance in teenage Japanese girls. In 1987, group Fudasha.
Zach.
I don't care if we have a guest on. She's gonna hear me butcher all of these names.
I'm terrible at saying names.
Fudasha
so butcher
asked
away.
Kadona's publishers for the rights to adapt this novel into a feature film. They wanted it to be directed by either Miyazaki or Isao Takahata of Studio Ghibli, but both of these directors were busy at this time. Miyazaki was working on My Neighbor Totoro, and Takahata was working on Grave of the Fireflies, respectively. But Miyazaki accepted the role of producer while the studio kind of continued to look for a director. He chose Tsuneo Katabuchi as the director. Katabuchi had worked with Miyazaki on Sherlock Hound, and Kiki's Delivery Service was going to be his directorial debut. And so Studio Ghibli got a screenwriter and was working on this movie, but Miyazaki was just dissatisfied with the first draft. He said that it was dry and too divergent from his own vision of the film. So, and since the novel was based in a fictional country in Northern Europe, Miyazaki, of course, took over the project and went out with his senior staff to research landscapes and other elements of the setting. They mainly stopped in Stockholm and the Swedish island of Gotland, which were their two kind of inspirations for the city in the movie. The original children's book the movie's based on is very different from the film. The novel is more episodic, consisting of small stories about various people and incidents Kiki encounters while making deliveries. Kiki overcomes many challenges in the novel based on, quote, her good heart, and consequently expands her circle of friends, and she faces no particular traumas or crises. Many of the more dramatic elements, such as Kiki losing her powers or the airship incident at the film's climax, are not present in the original story. However, in order to more clearly illustrate the themes of struggling with independence and growing up in the film, Miyazaki intended to have Kiki face tougher challenges and create a more potent sense of loneliness. One such challenge is Kiki's sudden loss of ability to fly. This event is only loosely paralleled in the novel, in which Kiki's broom breaks and merely requires her to fix it. Miyazaki remarked, quote, as movies always create a more realistic feeling, Kiki will suffer stronger setbacks and loneliness than in the original. Kadono was unhappy with the changes that were made between the film and the book, to the point that the project was in danger of being shelved at the screenplay stage. Miyazaki and Toshio Suzuki, the producer at Ghibli, went to the author's home and invited her to the film studio. After her visit to the studio, she decided to let the project continue. In the English dub of the movie done by Disney, it came out in 1998. It contained a lot of changes that were described as pragmatic. The changes were approved, though, by Studio Ghibli and Miyazaki. There were a number of additions and embellishments to the film's score, and these several lavish sound effects over sections that are silent in the Japanese original. The extra pieces of music composed by Paul Chihara range from soft piano music to a string pluck rendition of Grieg's In the Hall of the Mountain King. The depiction of the cat Gigi changed significantly in the Disney version. In the Japanese version, Gigi is voiced by Rei Sakuma, while in the English version, he's voiced by comedian Phil Hartman. In the Japanese culture, cats are usually depicted with feminine voices, whereas in American culture, their voices are more gender specific. A number of Hartman's lines exist where Gigi simply says nothing in the original. Gigi's personality is notably different between the two versions, showing a more cynical and sarcastic attitude in the Disney English version as opposed to cautious and conscientious in the original Japanese. My cat Gigi is looking at me now because I think I'm talking to him. No, it's not.
What version did everybody watch? The English dub or the Japanese subtitled version?
I actually watched the English dub this time.
Yeah, I did too. I'm a bad person. I knew I should have not watched that version.
No, it's good.
I did.
I've watched it more times that way than not, but I watched the Japanese sub this time.
In the original Japanese script, Kiki loses her ability to communicate with Gigi permanently, but the American version adds a line that implies that she is once again able to understand him at the end of the film. Miyazaki has said that Gigi is the immature side of Kiki, and this implies that Kiki, by the end of the original Japanese version, has matured beyond talking to her cat. The film also deals a lot with the concept of vulnerability. Critic Mark Schilling noted a scene during Kiki's first night away from home, staying with the Bakers. He said, early in the morning, she quickly steps out of her room into the outhouse and peers out to see the husband, Fuko, stretching his muscles. After he leaves the scene, Kiki rushes back to her room and slams the door behind her while gasping for air. Schilling says that the scene does absolutely nothing to advance the plot, and the humor in it is low, but it wordlessly and eloquently expresses Kiki's youth, vulnerability, and isolation. This fact I really loved. I just had to add it in there. But the conservative Christian group Concerned Women for America boycotted Kiki's delivery service, the screenings, in 1998, and they released a press release titled "Disney Reverts to Witchcraft in Japanese Animation," saying that everybody should boycott the Walt Disney Company because the company is still not family friendly, but continues to have a darker agenda. There weren't too many.
Disney's just not family friendly.
I thought that was very entertaining, though. This, especially in this movie, this is the most satanic of all their work.
Pushing those Satan values on you.
Exactly.
Yes. Basically,
I couldn't find really many reviews on this, both in Japan and America. There was an excerpt, though, from the Siskel and Ebert segment that came out in 1998, where Ebert gushed about how much he loved Miyazaki's work, and Siskel, who panned My Neighbor Totoro when it came out, also liked Kiki's. He said, he liked that there was this film about a young girl who actually held the attention of his 3-year-old son, who normally only liked monster truck rallies on TV. They both gave it right. Honestly, that's how I look at every movie. but they gave it 2 thumbs up. So yeah, that's Kiki's Delivery Service. I don't know. I guess let's go ahead and get into a discussion. I'll just say I've seen this. I watched this last night in preparation. I didn't intently watch it because I've seen this movie countless times. It's I probably didn't have to watch it and could go in there and do this, but I kind of wanted to, we usually discuss the movie at large, but I know on Wendy on Pet Cinematary, you like to focus it, start with the animal and kind of branch it out. So I thought we could kind of start with this character of Gigi, and I think that him, I mentioned it in the intro, but his character says a lot about, the personality of Kiki and kind of where she goes over the arc of the movie.
Yeah, and I didn't realize. You mentioned that in the English version, they just kind of hint at the fact that her and Gigi can talk again at the end of the movie, which I didn't pick up on at all, because I remember the movie ended and I was like, so she's just never going to talk to Gigi again? This is horrible. I was so heartbroken. I was like, oh my gosh.
Isn't there a moment where it's after the blimp disaster has been resolved and Gigi jumps on her shoulder and there's a camera crew in front of her? Doesn't Gigi say something
I thought he just
in that moment in the English
version?
version?
I thought he just meowed.
Oh. Yeah, in the Japanese
I
version,
totally
he just
missed that. I
meows.
didn't hear that at all, because I was just like, he's just a regular cat now. They're not going to talk. This is so sad.
Yeah, Gigi
I'd be so
calls out
pissed.
to her. He
But
says,
then,
Kiki, can you hear me?
But reading about, how he is kind of like this character she's this isolated girl, and he is kind of like, they grew up together and he's her only friend. And once they stop talking together, once they can't understand each other, I'm not saying it very well. Once they can't understand each other is the turning point of where they both are growing up into separate human beings. And it's like losing that childhood friend that you'll still see on Facebook or something but you're not in the closeness that you once were growing up. I thought that's actually a really sweet kind of, I don't know. I thought that was used very sweetly in the tale, kind of reading it that way.
No, that's a good way to put it, because Kiki's Delivery Service is such a sweet movie. I didn't realize that the conflicts, such as they were, have been added in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotta ramp up the tension in this movie.
Which honestly, I would probably watch the movie if it was directly, from the book, where it's just her and her little like run-ins with different people. That sounds like an amazing movie in itself.
Yeah.
And I do think this movie is very tense and dramatic and stressful at times, just in how mundane it is and how empathetic it is with her feeling of being a young adult newly employed and just like being very anxious about getting every single thing right. It's a very specific stage in life, like Miyazaki said, where even the smallest thing can feel like it has this enormous importance, this life-ending weight on your shoulders. But Wendy, you usually don't do animated movies on your podcast. You mostly just talk about like pet actors and things like that, right? So the fact that you can have a talking animal in this movie totally opens up new avenues for talking about pets / familiars, right?
Yeah, it was interesting in the way because, like, yeah, that's why I don't usually do animated movies on the... Well, I haven't yet. I haven't done any animated movies because they're so personalized and made into human characters, you know. I can't say the word. Like, I can't say the word. It's just... Yes, thank you very much. Because, like, my mouth just is never going to be able to say it. It doesn't want to. But, you know, the animals are made in that kind of way in animated movies. So I kind of like to focus on the fact that, like, in a live-action film, like, why are, like, you're...
Yeah.
The whole phrasing of, like... never work with children and animals, so why did you put this animal in this movie? Like, there had to have been a reason that you put this animal in the movie, and the animal's not going to be able to talk or anything like that. So it's interesting in an animated movie like this that it goes from talking and being friends with her to not talking, and I think that the significance of that and you know, it's like Gigi's kind of this character of the traditional... You think that he's just like this textbook witch and her black cat kind of character. Right. And he has this like layer to them, and through that talking to non-talking, there is significance for the character in its own special way that you really see with animated animals. I don't know if that came across right.
No, I 100% agree because I think it's difficult. You know, you have some animated movies where it's like the animal is there to be the comic relief and just kind of be this little sidekick. Right. And Gigi is 100% that. You have Phil Hartman, who this at this point in time is was very popular and was kind of known from SNL and in The Simpsons and other stuff like that as this very comedic voice. But yeah, I agree because I think that Gigi as a character has a lot more nuance to him rather than just being the kind of plucky sidekick that says one-liners and entertains you every so often to kind of keep the movie going. I think that this decision that Miyazaki made to to externalize her the kind of frustration and the lack of kind of creative drive that she hits halfway through this movie by taking away Gigi's voice is very effective because up to that point you're so entertained with his little quips and one-liners and his just the kind of the ways he interacts with both Kiki and the other characters, including his little girlfriend white cat that he has. And I think that when he Miyazaki takes that away from us halfway through this movie, it really does have this strong emotional impact and resonance with us because we're like, we just lost one of our friends in this movie, and I think that helps to kind of to structure that impact that he's trying to have with Kiki as a character and what she's dealing with.
Yeah, it helps you identify with her because she's losing her powers at the exact same moment that Gigi is growing up on his own. And they stop communicating with each other. So you think it's part of her powers, but it's really just a factor of growing up. And you feel that loss. You're like, no, but oh my God, he didn't even, he's just coming to eat, and then he's walking away. He doesn't even care that she's sick in bed. He's just wandering away. Like, you're just so heartbroken, and you're like, oh my God, what is happening? Yeah.
It's like the existence of a normal cat is just tragic in the context of this movie. But it feels incredibly tragic. This is a movie where the conflict is pretty low, like you were talking about. There's not a lot of violence or incident really outside of that blimp disaster at the end, but just the idea, like, nobody dies in this movie, but the idea that Gigi will never talk to Kiki again
is
really, really heartbreaking in a way that that's, you know, a traditional tragedy in a
no, I think you're right. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Maybe not be.
Well, I was just thinking that it's interesting doing an animated movie that comes from a different culture than America. You can kind of compare and contrast, because I mean, Disney felt the need to put some ADR line in at the end that he can still talk to her. So I guess you can put whatever, like, through vocal performance and just additional lines here or there.
And you can kind of see why Disney wanted this one as the Ghibli movie they were going to import into America. Wasn't this one of the first films that got a North American distribution through Disney, Zach?
Yeah.
Because it does feel on its face like it's fulfilling that animal sidekick trope. But I think that Gigi has so much more personality and so much more of a singular presence compared to, like, the raccoon in Pocahontas, for example, which, like, doesn't really have any bearing on the story. It's just kind of there as, like, this little shiny object to distract children with. There's, like, a thematic weight to Gigi. And I noticed this time through, like, how well Miyazaki hides that transition of Kiki losing her powers and Gigi stopped talking to him. It's at a moment where she doesn't really interact with Gigi very much. Like, it is, most of her dialogue in these scenes are with the baker, Osono. And it also happens when she's getting sick and she's sleeping in bed for a lot of time and can't actually talk to anybody. So just a lot of time passes and you just forget that there is much of a speaking relationship between her and the cat. And then eventually she comes back and it's just gone. You'll also notice that in the scene prior to when she recognizes that Gigi can't talk to her anymore, Gigi starts acting a lot more like an actual cat. And, like, there's one specific thing that, like, set me off in the middle of this movie, because this is, I think, the first time I've seen it since being a cat owner. But the baker is walking outside, Kiki is sick inside, and Gigi goes up to the window and just starts, like, pawing at the window and making this, like, ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk sound against the wall, which is just, like, something that my cat does every night when I'm trying to go to sleep. And I'm like, oh my God, just stop. But so there's, like, just a lot of subtle changes that Miyazaki does to communicate this while also tricking you with this sleight of hand and making you not recognize until it's too late.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. And I think it also comes, you guys are talking about, like, how there's no real action in the movie until the big blimp scene. And I think Gigi starting to act like a normal cat is a little bit of is that marker, because up to that point, like, I remember, like, I was just watching this movie being like, so it's just really just her delivering stuff. This is what this movie is. Like, I was like, okay. I mean, I'm enjoying it, but I was like, I wonder what's going to happen in this movie. Like, where, you know.
It's basically Animal Crossing.
There was.
Just running.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, okay, that's cute. It's just going to be like 2 hours of her flying around and getting to know people. And I thought maybe, like, the old woman was going to die or something like that. And then, like, Gigi started acting like a normal cat, and I was like, wait, what's going on? Something's weird is happening. This is not normal life anymore. I don't like this.
No, I was just gonna, add to that point that, I mean, and I think it's definitely on the surface it's pretty obvious, but it's Kiki as a character is this teenager who's kind of transitioning from being a teenager to adulthood, and that's obviously exemplified by the fact that she's leaving home to pursue her, I don't know which powers or which studies,
which training,
whatever you would like to refer to it as. But it's also when Gigi starts kind of losing his ability to speak with her, and she kind of loses this lifeline. One, it's this lifeline to this this person, almost connection to her family. She's separated from her family now, and Gigi was kind of this lifeline where she still had something from home that she could kind of hold on to. And I think that Gigi losing his voice is kind of shows that, but it also is just this kind of it shows going into adulthood, and how you have it's never like a big moment whenever you're going from a teenager to an adult that kind of shows that you're an adult. It's all these little small moments in these breaks from stuff that you're used to or comfortable with, that kind of after a while you realize that you've reached to that point. And I thought that Miyazaki handled that really well.
Yeah, I mean, all the mundane moments of the movie, like I was saying, have this monumentous importance because it's somebody's life. It is her figuring out who she's going to be as an adult. But I was going to say that it was interesting to watch this movie through the lens of knowing that I was going to come and talk about it with you, Wendy, because I knew that when you were watching it, you were mostly going to be focusing on the animal characters. And there's Gigi obviously in the center of the narrative, but I was also struck watching it this time just how many freaking animals there are in this movie, like
Jeff
on the
the dog.
Frenches. Jeff the dog! Oh my gosh, that scene is amazing. And I love how when so Jeff helps Gigi escape from that little boy's house, and Kiki needs to bring the cat doll that looks like Gigi back in there, and Gigi comes up to Kiki and he's like, Just give the doll to him. He'll take it in. He's a good boy. Like, I'm just hearing a cat say about a dog that he is a good boy was hilarious and charming.
Like, oh. But it was so like heartbreaking too. For some weird reason, that scene like almost made me cry, because I was like, oh, just something because I was listening to with the American dialogue, but the way Phil Hartman kind of said, just give it to him. He's a good boy. And I was like, oh, and like, he's clearly like this old dog, and like the family members are so familiar with him at the dinner table, like all joking about him, like, he loves that doll more than you love it, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like,
and the dog
this
is
dog's
losing
gonna
Gigi
die
too.
soon. And oh my God, he's
And
just
then, like,
a really
we lose
smart
that dog. That
Yeah.
dog is a delightful part of this narrative, and the dog just
I
kind of
was really-
matter-of-factly kicks the door closed, and we never see it again, and it's so sad.
Exactly. It was such a
There's
sweet
also,
little scene.
like
I was
when
like,
Kiki
oh.
is flying. Yeah, we have the crows when she has that disastrous delivery. We have her flying with
yeah.
geese at one point in the movie before a gust of wind sweeps her away. And then we have her flying with seagulls as well. And it's just a lot. And also a bunch of dogs kind of hanging out in the mise-en-scène of the movie, just people walking dogs on this very Jacques Tati-esque street. And I was also taken by the doppelgangers for Gigi that we see throughout this movie. Him on a coffee mug, and then the doll that looks identical to him. There's so many animals just peppered throughout this story that I had never noticed before because I wasn't looking for them. But it does feel like there's a lot of community with nature that Kiki experiences, I guess. Being a witch and being like closer to nature than the city, there's something that Miyazaki is doing there. He's always talking about industrialization and like deforestation and just environmentalism in general in his movies. And I would not have picked it up in this one if I wasn't specifically looking for animals.
Yeah, I think because she is a witch, and like you said, witches are supposed to be more in tune with nature. There's a sense of, even though she's a modern witch who wants to live in the city, there's all these like nice touches that she's still really familiar with the earth. And trying to, I loved the crows and that artist woman. Their relationship was very much like a future. Like kind of a future version of Kiki, if you want, because she is with all these animals that she adores and thinks, we have a good relationship. I know them, they know me. We kind of communicate, even though we can't talk. At the time, Gigi and Kiki could. So you see this kind of grown-up version of them. And I really just adored that relationship. As well. But yeah, I think all the animals are kind of in there to add to that nature feeling. And
I also forgot about the other doppelganger for Gigi, which is the cat on the broom of the witch while Kiki is flying into town. Yeah, the snooty witch. Gigi is very judgmental of other animals that are not as down to earth as him. He calls that cat a oh gosh, what a snob, he says. And then he says about the neighbor's cat, like Miss Snooty Cat. But I think both of those examples are like cool moments where you see animals resembling their owners, right? Like the cat on the witch that is not Kiki flying into the city, they just have the exact same posture. They're sitting up this impossibly straight, and kind of their eyes are very narrowed and judgmental. And you kind of see the same thing with the neighbor's cat. The neighbor's a fashion designer, and that is the most like posh plush cat you could possibly imagine. Interesting how Gigi changes his mind about that cat over the course of the narrative. Maybe you see Gigi growing and maturing over the course of the story too, in a way that's backgrounded, because we're so focused on Kiki's maturity.
Yeah. Well, Kiki and Gigi both find a person that they are attracted to, but at first they're like, ugh, gross, get away. And it's that growing up of being like, actually, you know what? You kind of make me feel tingly, and that's, again, the beginning of the end of kind of their communicating together, but is that realization of, oh, there's another person in this world that I kind of want to get to know better.
Do we think that Kiki and Tombo are a romantic thing at the end of this movie? I never got the feeling.
Oh, they're hot and heavy.
I don't know, watching it this time, I got a real uncomfortable vibe from Tombo. I'm like, you need to calm down and stop following her around.
He's a little bit stalkery.
You don't know her name.
I don't. Well, I mean, yeah, but at the same time, he's like a total teenage boy where he's just like, oh, hello, I'm just going to follow you around. That's how you meet people. That's how people, endear themselves to you. I'm just going to follow you around and be kind of creepy. Like, he's creepy, but it's like in a charming, 12-year-old boy. It's fine. It's whatever. It's not harmful.
Well, to me, all the characters kind of came off as younger than what they're supposed to be. I was like, oh, Kiki's supposed to be 13? Like, maybe her, okay, but he definitely seemed like he was like 10 or 11-ish. But it's probably because he was following her around like a lost dog kind of thing. But yeah, he gets a little on the creepy side, definitely at some points.
I just think there's one, it's refreshing in all of Miyazaki's films that there's often a lead boy and a lead girl, but there's very rarely any sort of romantic chemistry between them. It is just, they are two people in this story, in this world together. They have mutual respect. They have a friendship, but it doesn't necessarily have to be anything more than that. Like
Whatever the thing is, but his thing is aerospace.
Well, if you saw a person flying, you'd be obsessed with them. If I saw her flying down a street, I'd be like, holy crap, I want to talk to that person. She can fly. I'm just saying, I would probably be creepy toward the flying girl as well, because I'd be like, how the hell are you flying? Let's talk about that. That sounds like that's something to talk about.
I'm now imagining Zach Dennis following around like Kim Min Hee on a broomstick,
don't
flying
tease me.
through the air.
I would 100% follow her around.
I also just like the soundbite of you saying, if I saw the flying girl, I'd follow her around too.
That's what we're going to leave the podcast in with.
It's a great little clip.
If I saw a flying girl, I'd follow her. Welcome to Cinematary. Now, Wendy, I'm not sure. Have you seen any of Miyazaki's movies before this one?
Yeah, I've seen, oh God, I can't remember the name of it. Like, they do, like, once a year here in New York, they do, like, Miyazaki festivals, I feel like IFC does. And I, most recently, maybe like a year or so ago, I went and saw, what is it called? Like, Porto Rosso, the flying pig one? Yes.
Porco Rosso.
Yeah, the flying pig one. I went and saw that one not too long ago, but I haven't watched one of the films, his films in a while. So it's definitely been a while since I've watched one.
Was this your first time with Kiki's Delivery Service?
It was. I don't know why. I've seen, every time I see something from it, I think it's the most adorable thing, and especially Gigi. I'm just like, what is this little black cat? That is the most adorable thing I've ever seen. It would be a good tattoo. But yeah, I've never sat down and watched it.
So coming to it from the complete opposite perspective of us, who have all seen it like probably approaching a dozen times, and growing up with this movie once it got imported to America. How much did you enjoy the movie just as an adult?
I enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. I thought it was very sweet. I didn't think that it was heavy on any kind of issues. I'm already forgetting the name of it again. But I thought it was a sweet tale, and I'm always in for a good witch tale. I love. It's a film centered around a young girl, kind of coming of age story, which I love and adore. So, I thought it was really enjoyable. I liked it a lot.
I watched one of the special features on my Blu-ray of this thing, and it was called Kiki and Gigi.
Aww.
So I went into it expecting for maybe there to be some like behind the scenes stuff about the creation of the cat character or something like that. But mostly it was focused on just the idea behind crafting the character of Kiki. And Miyazaki revealed this is his first movie with a female protagonist, I believe, and that becomes a basic staple for his filmography. But he mentions that he was very hesitant to make a movie about a young girl at first because apparently he's from a family of all boys.
Yeah.
And he said he was worried he was not be able to do it right, but now he's just become so renowned for how well written his female characters are. I think is fascinating.
Hold on. I'm gonna have to question your police work there, because Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind has a female protagonist.
Ah, you are correct.
Mm-hmm.
She does.
That is weird. I mean, in that interview, Miyazaki, he seemed so weirded out by the idea of like, well, I don't know if I could do a female character. That's so strange considering that Nausicaa would have been in recent memory when he.
Because I believe that's the movie he made. I think it was Nausicaa and then Porco Rosso and then this one. So yeah, I mean I guess maybe coming off of Porco Rosso where he had worked with a very macho male character. I don't know.
Male pig.
Male pig.
Yes.
I apologize.
I'm pretty sure the term chauvinist pig is used in something in that movie.
Well, I mean, how long did these films take to make too? He may have
probably
not forgotten. I would hate to say forgotten, but kind of while speaking, and then later on would have been like, oh, dum hey, you made that other movie with a world, but while he was being interviewed, he may have totally just kind of forgotten about it because it had been like 10 years prior or something.
That is most likely the
and
case.
possibly they also he also did I would assume the interview, if it was related to the Disney release, it probably that was happening in the mid 90s, late 90s. So I mean he's an older gentleman. He forgets things. Well, as we kind of wind down, any final thoughts on Kiki's Delivery Service? Any last takeaways from this movie?
I recommend it. I thought it was really charming. It's a super sweet movie, and I actually, while I was watching it, I kept wanting to text my boss, who has a daughter who just turned 13, and be like, oh, you should tell your daughter to watch this movie. But then I was like, is it too kiddie for an actual 13-year-old girl of modern age? I thought it might be a little too kiddie for it, but
maybe, yeah.
But then I don't know, because
I feel like I feel like this would almost be perfect for maybe 8 to 10, where it's like they're not a teenager yet, but they're super excited to be a teenager, and so this kind of gives them a little bit of a window into that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just the excitement of thinking about, oh man, what if I went out on my own as a teenager?
What if I got into child labor?
I could do this. But it's actually very stressful. Yes. My closing thought is just how comforting this movie is to me. I mean, it is a very sweet movie, but it's also, I feel like, a very stressful movie at times too. It's about entering the world of work and just like being exhausted all the time. There's that GIF that has been circulating on the internet for a long time of Kiki coming home and just collapsing onto her bed and like, this is me after Monday or something like that. And I even though I am not 13, I feel like there have been many moments in my life where I'm going through a transitional phase and like moving on to the next step and being a small fish in a big pond, and I feel a lot like Kiki. I relate to her, and this movie is giving you that emotional experience of being in that place, but it's also, it kind of like pats you on the head and says like everything will be okay, and not in a corny cliche Disney way, just a way that feels very true to life, very very wise. And this is one of my favorite Miyazaki movies, maybe my second favorite behind Spirited Away.
Lydia, anything?
Oh, I was just thinking way back to one of your first comments, Wendy, is like when you put an animal in a movie, it's a very deliberate choice. And when you're working with animation, everything is a really deliberate choice.
True.
So, and when, I don't know, you have kind of the design of animals, like the crows and the geese and Jeff the dog all look pretty natural. And then, I don't know, maybe Gigi becomes a little bit less cartoony as he matures. And because that's not a thing you could do with a live action pet. I'm thinking of, like, I don't know, like Hocus Pocus, the cat the cat talks, but
Gigi's eyes move a lot left to right in the first half of the movie, and they do not move in the second half. So,
right, I'm just thinking
small physical ticks that he uses.
And with a animated performance, even if you had like a live action cat performance with a voiceover, I think you can capture something much more dynamic and less hokey.
Yeah.
I'm glad you picked Kiki's because I hadn't approached it from that angle before.
Yeah. I definitely second Andrew. I think that this is probably my second favorite of Miyazaki's work. I think this also exemplifies kind of the differences between the approach of American animation to the approach of Japanese animation. And we talked about it a little bit before, but I think that his other work, Spirited Away, Princess Mononoke, Porco Rosso, I think that kind of has a kind of a wider swing from being like American animation. And I think that Kiki's Delivery Service is definitely a movie that you could see an American studio make, but I think that it also shows the dedication and care that Miyazaki puts into his characters and his stories, but also just kind of the subtle differences that Studio Ghibli would make rather than a DreamWorks or Pixar or whatever the hell that company that makes the Minions movies and terrorizes America with. But
yeah, this is not The Secret Life of Pets.
This is not The Secret Life of Pets.
Yeah.
But I think that just like we've talked about, these kind of subtle, small moments between characters that, again, this is a story that I could see, DreamWorks or Pixar making, but those small, I don't see them having those small moments, those tiny interactions with people. Even though it's just a kind of like the moment that Mark Schilling, the critic, said before, where it's this moment that has absolutely nothing to do with the plot, but it's so telling of just Kiki as a character. I just really appreciate all of those moments while watching this, and I think that adds the kind of the joy of just seeing this movie over and over again. Like I said before, I've seen this countless times. I really didn't have to watch it before we talked about this, and I've talked about it easily, but it's always nice to watch, to kind of revisit this movie, because it does have this breeziness to it, but it also tackles issues that are tackled in teen movies or teen-centered animated movies. But the way they do it, it feels like it's much more enriching. It feels like the lesson is being taught in a much more genuine way, rather than just being some force to get the characters from plot A to plot B. I think the kind of plotlessness of Kiki's Delivery Service aids it into being this more it allows you to kind of stew on a lot of these issues that, again, that I feel like the target audience would be interested in and kind of face and be able to see it in this other light. That I think it's just this remarkably complex movie for being so simple.
Yeah, there's a subtlety to it, whereas American movies, and especially American animation movies, are so loud and boisterous with their points that to watch this one where, you know, like I said, halfway through it, I was just like, so we're really just watching this girl deliver some stuff. All right, I'm into it, you know, like, but then if you kind of reflect on it later, you're like, oh, I see. There's these small hints kind of peppered throughout of this kind of slow arc that's happening in the film, and kind of just a nice way of discussing coming of age that you don't usually see.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, I guess that will wrap up this episode of Cinematary. Before we do our plugs, Wendy, I'm gonna let you plug your podcast and such before us.
Oh, sure. Oh, thanks. So my podcast, like you mentioned before, is called Pet Cinematary. You can check me out on iTunes or anywhere that podcasts are available. Follow me on Twitter at Pet Cinematary. And then I also have an Instagram account. Again, just Pet Cinematary. And go check me out sometime.
I would recommend following both of them because she
I can vouch for Wendy's Twitter.
There's some good photos and stuff.
Oh, what are you about to say? You're about to say the exact same thing as me.
She has good photos and tweets, so it's always fun to I recommend watching it or following it on that basis.
Oh, thanks.
A lot of cinematic animal gifs that I appreciate.
Which it's much needed.
It's a nice breakup on your Twitter feed every now and then.
That and endless stream are
definitely
the two things that keep me going.
But yeah, if you are looking for stuff on Cinematary, you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter at handle @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary. We'll repost all of the movies that we talked about in this episode. Next week, we're going to be going on another random topic. Andrew, I'm going to let you quickly explain what you want to talk about because I don't really remember what it was.
Okay, so my topic for next week is essentially a question, which is, what is a film? Which sounds like a very pretentious, ponderous question, but the reason why I want to ask it is because I feel like there's been a lot of things come out in the last year or 2 years that really are on the borderline of like, can we put them into our top 10 of the year? I'm thinking of like Beyonce's Lemonade. I'm thinking of OJ Made in America. I'm thinking about this year we have Twin Peaks: The Return. You also have Public Cinema showed The Show About the Show, which was a web series that got played in theaters and feels like a film, but also has like credits throughout when the episodes break. And I just want to talk about like, what is our criteria for what counts as a film and what counts as a TV show and what counts as a web series and what counts as like an extended music video. What is our criteria here? How can we reconcile these things that feel like films but maybe aren't technically? So if you have ideas for things that are interesting case studies in that, send them to us and we can talk about them on the show next week.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I will say we'll address it maybe next week. We do have a comment that was made on one of our recent Facebook posts from an episode.
My favorite comment.
It's absolutely my favorite comment of all time. But I want to just say to that listener that, one, thank you so much for commenting. Please, I hope this encourages more people to do it, especially these comments. I'm 100% behind these comments. But we're gonna
bullying comments is what we're saying.
Yeah, we're gonna wait until the person that he is commenting about is back on the podcast to better address it. But we want to just say that we have got it. We're excited about it, and we will talk about it on a future episode. That was very vague. But guys, thank you.
It concerns pretentious twaddle.
Yeah, so I think it'll work into next week. But Wendy, thank you so much again. I believe that'll wrap up this episode. Thank you guys for listening. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.